They don't want government to rush into any response because the prize on offer is an economic agreement. We don't want to do anything that undermines that. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We are still in discussions with our counterparts in the United States. The biggest impact comes from global tariffs, not UK-specific ones. The next biggest impact on the economy, both on growth and inflation, comes from retaliation. And actually, the specific tariffs on the UK are less relevant to the growth and inflation impacts than the global picture, because we are an open trading economy, and depressed demand from overseas because of tariffs, higher inflation overseas because of tariffs has a direct impact on the UK, whether we are subject to
I can
tariffs.
see why a Brexiter might make the argument that we've got a preferential treatment. Fantastic. I do seem to recall, well, there's two things. First of all, we all know that we've lost an enormous amount of trade as a result of the dislocation with the EU. And then on top of that, one of the principal arguments during the Brexit campaign was that we would be able to lean in an Atlanticist direction, that we would be able to get a US-UK trade deal. Where is it? So we're in a net position where we've lost trade with the EU. We have a more distant economic relationship with the EU, the most distant virtually of any country in Europe with the EU, and we've got 10% from tariffs from the United States. Whoop-de-doo.
I think it's also worth asking what a US-UK trade deal is worth.
Quite.
Donald Trump had a trade deal with Canada and Mexico, which he signed himself and said this was the greatest deal ever.
Yeah,
he's come back to power and he's ripping it up.
In Mark Carney, who's currently the Prime Minister of Canada, someone who is massively standing up to Trump and challenging him, whereas we have a British Prime Minister who's doing his best to placate Donald Trump. Which do you think is the right approach?
I think Mark Carney's approach is the right approach. Trump is a bully, and if you stand up to bullies, you might get somewhere. Trying to placate them, that sounds like 1938 to me.
Rosie Duffield, a former Labour MP who left the Labour Party and now sits as an independent in Canterbury. And she was on Times Radio and discussing what's going on with Trump tariffs, what's going on in the Labour Party, and how many of the Labour MPs are feeling. Rosie is a committed Remainer and fought very hard in the Brexit years. And Rosie has had a pretty tough time from some people in the Labour Party. And now that Rosie has left the Labour Party, obviously she's free to speak her mind and also talk about what is going on. So fascinating from her, from my perspective, to really hear about what the rural MPs are thinking. And I cannot understand if they think that they are going to lose their seats. They're only going to be in there for one term only, as to why they wouldn't follow Rosie and do the same. I'm pretty sure at some stage this could happen. Indeed, in 1931, there was a Labour government led by Ramsay MacDonald, and a similar thing happened with tariffs from America, and a similar appeasement, and the Labour Party was forced by the United States to reduce welfare, and many of the Labour MPs couldn't stomach it, and the party split. But Ramsay MacDonald formed a coalition with the Tories, and you can almost see this happening, especially yesterday in PMQs when Kemi Badenoch was really bigging up the possibility of an America trade deal, which of course the Conservatives want. The Conservatives do back the welfare cuts, and they do back a lot of thinning down of the state, so we have lower taxes. And this is really the opposite of what Labour values are. And so it is going to be fascinating to see how much the Labour Party itself will hold together as we go over these next few months, particularly if Keir Starmer signs a trade deal with Donald Trump. It was estimated by Dennis McShane that there are about 500 pro-European MPs in Parliament out of 650. And if Keir Starmer manages to hold his government together and deliver an American trade deal, which really would make rejoining for the birds, through over the line, then that would be really a smack in the teeth for the democracy that we do have, which isn't full democracy with first past the post, but only 14%. Polls show only 14% back a trade deal with Trump. Everybody in Britain pretty much is supportive of Ukraine. How could Starmer do this to us? It's so undemocratic. Anyway, have a listen to what Rosie has to say, and we'll keep an eye on what happens with the Labour MPs going forward, and to see if we end up in a dreaded trade deal with chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef.
As an arch anti-Brexiteer, I'm thinking, you know, here we are and we're having to grovel to these countries because we're not in the biggest trading bloc anymore. And I think it was pretty unedifying seeing that footage of Keir really sucking up to someone who a few years ago everyone in his frontline, cabinet was kind of slagging off, basically. So they're now dependent on Trump's kind of godlike bestowal of which of these tariffs they impose on us or not. Are we in the favourite top few? Are we going to get a nice favour because the King's invited him over? It's not very proud. It's not something that makes you proud to be British. And I think, the fact that they don't have much of a clue means that there isn't this backroom kind of good relationship wheeler dealing with that you would imagine if you're just sort of sitting at home waiting to hear the answer, which is slightly worrying, actually. I did it in Runcorn, putting out a sort of anti-asylum hotels video, almost word for word exactly the same as the Labour candidate. And I'm thinking, this is how to pee off the left. People like Diane Abbott, the rest of us that are pretty much on the left of the party, and they're already pretty peed off. And then you've got Reform and the right wing of the party, kind of, who is happy here? I don't know who they think they're appealing to. Signed up for this. I was in a debate the other day when I was talking about Brexit, and one of the new Labour ones just sort of read a line about, it wasn't in the manifesto to rejoin. But none of this was in the manifesto. We wouldn't have gone to the doors, I don't think, most of us. With this manifesto, we would have been not voted for. I was worried about what was coming down the line, but I was prepared to give them a chance. My colleagues were going, right, let's just see. Surely when we get in, we'll be more of a Labour government. That's what you would expect. And I was a bit uncomfortable with the fact that maybe we were duping people, but I did think, well, perhaps they're going to listen to the feedback that MPs had on the doorstep. None of that happened. We just seem to be in this bizarre, I don't know what we are. I don't know what we're for. We're trying to ape Reform. We're trying to ape former Tories. George Osborne was mentioned. And yet that's not what we're there for. Those people exist already, Having sat on the EFRA committee for 4 or 5 years, we were debating all of this. Do we have to accept sheep from Australia that's not, the same standards as ours and all that sort of stuff? And I hope we don't do that. I can't imagine we would. That would be uber embarrassing, I think, if we stooped to that level. It's very, very gloomy. And again, I've been in the tea room with some colleagues and in various WhatsApp groups. And my former colleagues, are still my colleagues and still my friends, are a kind of mixture of despair, traumatised, raging, almost all of the time. Kit will know this because we put our party hats aside when we mix in those kind of rooms, as you know. And people are very angry, very upset, and not happy at all about being a Labour MP at the moment. No, because this regime isn't what we know of as Labour, really.
I agree with Rosie. I feel very sorry for a lot of new Labour MPs who, when they look back and they pinpoint the moment at which they became one-term MPs, I think they'll look at this statement and the budget that came before it and think that was what sowed the seeds of their defeat. I don't think any of them knocked on doors for this kind of package, right?
Absolutely not, but particularly the rural MPs. There was just 2 of us who were rural English MPs that were Labour last time around, and we had a lot of things to do, and now there are 70. We've just been talking about imports and exports. The farmers are already really angry with the new government, and things like importing stuff that's substandard that they then have to compete about. Given this budget, the last one, those rural Liberal MPs are essentially gone if this goes ahead like it has been. I think we're a bit bored of just hearing that. Really, you know, I understand the way that they saw the £22 billion black hole, but I think the country and, you know, pretty much everyone who sits in PMQs every Wednesday is a little bit fed up of just hearing that. You've said it, you've established it as your catchphrase. Please say something in addition to that. Like, what are you going to do about it? What have you done? She's definitely got to break these rules, hasn't she? These self-imposed rules. They're gone, more or less. You know? That's the thing. We're sort of, because it's exactly what you said, Ali. It's like, because there isn't a narrative, it does feel incredibly unstable because we just don't know what's around the corner. It feels like, you know, we're on a proverbial roller coaster and we could be going up or down or levelling out. You know, we just don't know what is the next thing. And that's because there's a lack of story or narrative. They feel like they're reacting, they're not proactive, there wasn't a plan. And that's a pretty scary state, I would have thought, for most voters to be in. We're caught in this bubble, kind of trying to predict what's going to happen, because we do need to take it to our voters. Our constituents are writing in saying, as a business, I can't plan for anything. As a farmer, I can't plan for anything. You know, and we don't know what to tell them. That's pretty awful.